Happy holidays, everyone. I hope out of this incredible year, people still have something to gather around and enjoy. And if that's not family, hopefully you can find it within yourself. Um, what I want to talk about today is I had a friend recently ask what was the issue with the Federal Reserve. Um, And to really understand all that goes into the Federal Reserve requires more than economic theory. We have to understand history, um, possibly theology, uh, sociology. Many things go into understanding some of these institutions that operate and function within our society. And what I told him was that the Federal Reserve is responsible for controlling the money supply, and it's an institution of private banks. Um, but the Federal Reserve itself basically prints money. They create money and they lend this out to the big banks around the nation, which are J.P. Morgan Chase, um, uh, etc. And what we what's important to understand in the nature of the Federal Reserve is that their policies of lowering interest rates come at a cost. And basically they have a monopoly on the creation of money. So no one else is allowed to create money except for the Federal Reserve. And what we're seeing in contemporary times, to relate this to contemporary issues, is this new stimulus plan, or this COVID Relief Act that is allowing the Federal Reserve to create $900 billion dollars. And as we've seen, this gets divided up in many ways, and it has come to the end result of $600 per person with certain conditions. But some people are trying to push it up to $2,000. Whatever the situation is, what we have to realize is that the Federal Reserve, in its creation of money, um, in its inflationary policies, is one of, as Mises said, the most radical institutions within a society. Because, and this is again going into economics, the quantity theory of money states that the value of money is dependent on the quantity of money. So the definition of inflation being an increase in the money supply means that when the quantity of money increases, the value of the individual monetary unit decreases. Um, and when you have inflation, this increase in the money supply, you have more money to uh, people can say that, well, inflation is the rise in prices. But the question that we must ask is, where did the additional money come from in order to pay for those increased prices? And this money comes from the Federal Reserve and its creation of this money. And what we have to realize is that with the creation of new money, prices are never neutral. They adjust over time, and you have early receivers and late receivers of the newly created money. And the early receivers are the big banks and the friends of the big banks. So when the Federal Reserve creates this new money, it's not distributed via helicopter or equally to all people at all times in all locations. No, this money goes to the big banks, and when the big banks receive this money, they're able to lower their interest rates, and so now more people are taking out loans and either creating or starting new businesses or maintaining the businesses that they already have. And so what we have is this illusionary good times, or this illusionary profits, where people maintain their business under this illusionary created money, and it's backed by the Federal Reserve rather than the service to consumers that this business is supposed to be generating. And what we have to understand is the Great Depression was not caused by a gold standard. The Great Depression in the 1930s was caught in started in 1929, was due to the fact that we had these inflationary policies that led the Roaring Twenties. This is the crack up cycle, part of the cycle of the crack up boom. And so what happened was the Roaring Twenties, the good times, resulted in the Depression, in the hard times, because the the prices need to adjust to the resources that are being used in a society. And when they adjust, it reveals how prices have possibly been misconstrued, or how resources have been misconstrued. And so what we're seeing right now is the fact that we're in another inflationary period where the Federal Reserve is printing money. And again, we have to understand political science or political philosophy in democracy and in the incentive structure and time preference. When you have a politician who's only in for a 4-year period, their incentive is not to let the economy collapse on them, but to push it off. Be very short-minded people. Again, as Hans Hoppe says, like little children. They have to have all the fun now. They can't be like adults and take on the burden of their debts that they've incurred. So they will keep increasing the money supply, and they'll keep inflation going, and this will lead to increased prices, or more money, and then higher demand for goods, and an increase in prices. And then the government might establish, as governments in history have done, price controls. And this will eliminate the marginal profiters of the price controlled industries. It will price them out of the market. There's no profits to be made. Why would they keep production in a business, an industry line that does not serve them to better off? And now not only are the producers of that good hurt, the consumers are hurt too, because now they do not have the products that they originally were supposed to have, because now there's shortages. So going back to the money supply and the policies of inflation and the Federal Reserve, as Mises says, the policy of inflation is one of the most radical institutions in a society, because it affects people's savings, earnings, workings, spendings. All of this, what they have to give to their children, is affected. And that's why this is so serious, because governments will keep printing pieces of paper because it betters them off. They are the monopolists of this situation. And when you do not have competitive currencies in a society, it leaves the monopolized currency vulnerable to exploitation. And this is what we're witnessing with the government. And conservatives do not conserve anything. These policies of stimulus have gone under a conservative president. I would argue that he's not conservative at all, rather a Democrat in one sense of the term. And what we need to get away from is the theology that government institutions are sacrosanct and holy, and that they can hold up in a moral sense, let alone a legal sense. Government institutions have been created for the benefit of, first and foremost, governments, and second off, civilians. And Marx is in some sense accurate that there is classes in society, but it's not what people tend to think. It's not what Marx uh, explicitly stated as the classes of the bourgeoisie and proletariats. There are exploiters, and this is the government. They exploit people via taxation. Um, these class wars, race wars, gender wars are almost illusionary. They're almost invisible. They're not nearly as big of a threat as the war of governments versus people. And when you have alternative and competitive currencies enter a society, governments don't tend to like this because it completely undermines their operations of a military industrial complex, a prison industrial complex, their unions, their control on wages, their availability to expand corporate laws and lobby for bailouts. And if you look at this corona stimulus relief package, I mean, you saw the video of the current president listing off how many millions of dollars were going to elsewhere, to other countries, and it's not going to the people, the civilians of one's own government. And this is, following the year that people have been raped the most by their government, told to stay home, shut their business down, and thrown some pocket change. It's pretty awful what the government has done to its people in this year. And someone said that Americans are not willing to sacrifice, their freedom to go to a bar and be elbow to elbow with people, because they're selfish and they don't care about grandma. And in some sense, I'm proud to have that in my culture. I'm proud that I can't be submissive to any governmental authority that tells me, what to do or how to live my life. It's not their decision, and neither is it mine to commit acts of violence against people. But what I find to be just is what I'll take action in. And I don't think that it in any way, the actions of living my life in a safe and respectable manner is equivalent to me inflicting potential harm on someone's life in a manner of possible murder. Under democracy, I can't explain this, but Hans Hoppe explains this very well, where he talks about the erosion of society, I believe under democracy. And Lou Rockwell, in this book, Against the Left, explains very well in chapter 1 even, titled The Assault on the Family. And this comes from Marx himself and Lenin, that that the family structure must be eroded in order to have it substituted for a new structure. And I think a lot of this, it comes back to theology of what divine spirit or being do we put our faith in. And mine is not in any governments. I studying history and bureaucracy. My faith is in individuals, and logic and reasoning. And this is a science beyond any omnipotent government. So going into the new year, I'll make it my duty to be more consistent and stronger, a lot stronger, in my ability to perceive what I perceive to be truth. And although that will be difficult, nothing in life worth doing ever is. Thank you.